We are about halfway through Season 6 of Disney Speedstorm, and that means it's time to update our tier list. It's been a while since I've made one of these, and we have a ton of new racers to cover, so let's get into it. Now, just a quick disclaimer before I start today's video, I want to give a big shout out to everyone in my Discord server, all the top players who helped me make this definitive tier list, and if you want to join the discussion yourself or just listen to it, you can join my Discord server, link in my description below. And I also want to say that just because your favorite racer is in the F tier, don't let that discourage you from upgrading them or playing them. I truly believe if you invest time and resources into any character, they can be good. Without further ado, let's kick things off. Starting at the bottom of the F tier, we have Hortensia. Now, there's nothing really noteworthy about Hortensia. Her abilities suck, her stats suck. She doesn't have access to good crew members because she's a part of the Oswald collection. She's just not a very good racer, and her abilities are bugged right now. Once they get fixed, maybe she'll move up to like the C tier or something, but overall, she's not a great racer in my opinion. Now, following Hortensia, we have Lilo. Now, Lilo got some balance adjustments in the latest patch to the game, where they actually took away the damage her surfboard did and then buffed her top speed in turn. And that top speed buff was clearly not enough. Her surfboard was kind of the only thing keeping her going before. Her camera is just not good enough to make up for the faults to her charged activation, and Lilo has quickly fallen to the F tier as she is pretty much useless. Now, following Lilo and rounding out the F tier, we have Mowgli. Mowgli has been really bad for a while. He's just a bad speedster with a bad offensive ability that doesn't have a lot of utility in the game, and he didn't get any buffs this season, which he desperately needed. He definitely could have used the Jasmine treatment, but unfortunately Mowgli stays one of the worst characters in the game. Moving on up to the D tier, we have Daisy Duck. Now, Daisy Duck is pretty much just a worse version of Donald in every way. With the exception of top speed, her top speed is slightly higher, but she's a trickster, and while tricksters did get a buff, that's the only thing keeping Daisy in the D tier. Besides that, she has almost no usefulness. Her abilities are just kind of bad, her stats are kind of bad, she's just not a good character. Now, following Daisy in the D tier, we have Hades. Now, Hades is a very interesting racer. I love the idea of his kit. You know, as you pass people, you get more boost, and whenever people pass you, you can stun them. But overall, it's just really clunky, and if anyone has, cloak or shield or a way to stop you from getting hit, or if you just get stuck in the back, Hades is going to be useless, and overall, he just hasn't found his time to shine. Maybe he'll be good in the future, but right now, Hades is just not it. Now, following Hades in the D tier, we have Minnie Mouse. Now, Minnie Mouse actually got a top speed nerf this season, which I'm just not sure why they would do that to her. She was already a pretty bad racer before, she was pretty much unnotable. She sat in like the C tier, I think, and now that her top speed has been reduced even further, which was already her greatest weakness, she truly is now just a pretty bad racer, and her ability helps everyone, not just herself, which I think is never a good quality to have, and so Minnie Mouse finds herself in the D tier. Following Minnie Mouse, we have Mulan. Now, Mulan has actually gone up a little bit since the last tier list, and that is simply because of the Trickster buff. Now she can side bash people to get more skills, but a Trickster with primary hack and a pretty clunky offensive ability and not a great top speed, in a meta where top speed is truly king, having the 4th worst in the game is going to ensure that you're pretty low on this tier list, and Mulan, she just doesn't make the cut. Moving on up to the C tier, we now have Jafar. Now, Jafar has never really been a great racer in my opinion. He's always been kind of a clunky brawler that could have definitely benefited from a much higher top speed, a bit of a heavier build, and while his top speed isn't terrible, it's not good enough to compete with the best of the best, and overall, he's just a pretty average racer with pretty average offensive abilities and not a lot of defense. Now, following Jafar in the C tier, we have the big cheese himself, Mickey Mouse. And Mickey Mouse, I've talked about him a lot. There's nothing great about him. He's really held back by his top speed and the fact that his ability benefits everyone, not himself, and it really doesn't work well with his boost bar, as he often has a full boost bar, yet he's using his ability and they just kind of clash together. It doesn't work well. He's not a terrible racer, but again, he really needs a top speed buff to take him above and beyond. Following Mickey Mouse, we have someone who has a very similar problem as him, and that is Meg. Now, Meg has the second worst top speed in the game, however, she has one of the best boost stats, but it's honestly kind of redundant, because she has the boost power-up, her unique skill generates more boost for her, and she's a trickster, meaning she can drift to keep her boost bar full the entire game. So oftentimes what happens with Meg is you just have so much boost, and you don't need it. It'd be so much better if she had Rush or a power-up that actually helped her, rather than just keep getting boost over and over and over again when her boost bar is already full and her top speed is just not high enough to catch anyone despite her insane amount of boost. Now, following Meg, we have Donald Duck. Now, Donald Duck can very much fluctuate his tiers based on the meta, and right now top speed is out, and therefore Donald is out. I believe he was like A tier on the last tier list, but now that top speed is just king, Donald Duck having the worst top speed in the game by far is just not gonna make the cut. He has a pretty decent kit that has abilities to be used effectively in different situations, but overall he's kind of just a slow brawler, not high enough top speed despite his incredible handling stats. Now, following Donald, we have Jack Sparrow. Now, there's nothing really I can say about Jack Sparrow. I just really wish that his skill gave him immunity. I think if he had that, he would be a much better racer. But all his stats are just very average. He's like in the middle of the pack for top speed. He's a trickster, which got a buff, so he's kind of better now. But his ability just isn't great. There's nothing special about Jack, and so I think he's comfortably in the C tier. Now, following Jack Sparrow, we have our first new racer, King Triton. Now, King Triton I think is actually being slept on a little bit here, but again, this tier list isn't really my opinion, it's sort of all the top players, and this is where King Triton got ranked. I think his issue is that he's just kind of clunky. His abilities don't have a lot of utilization. The wave, while it does give him boost, doesn't do enough to opponents, and hitting people with a trident, let's be real, it's almost impossible. His normal activation is pretty much useless, which means if King Triton's in the back, he is useless, and despite his high top speed, I think his handling and everything else just makes him a little bit too clunky, which is why he is in the C tier. Now, following King Triton, we have Goofy. Not a lot to say about Goofy. His normal ability is essentially useless. It drives yourself, but it's so slow and you're almost never going to stun people with it. And his charged rocket, it's just a shadow of what Buzz Lightyear can do, and it really can't stand up to it at all. On top of that, he has a lower top speed and just overall isn't great. He's just an average defender who comfortably finds his way in the C tier. Now, following Goofy, we have everyone's favorite purple dragon, Figment, who is finally out of the bottom tier and found his way up to almost the top of the C tier, so not terrible. Figment did get a buff this season, which did help him considerably, as he is now in the C tier, but overall he's still not great. His ability definitely needs a little bit more love. I think if it made him immune, that might be the push he needs, but overall it just doesn't give him enough of a speed boost for the work it is to stun people, and there's better options out there for the Trickster class for sure. And finally, rounding out the C tier, we have Prince Eric. Now, Prince Eric is brand new to the game and this tier list, and he is honestly one of the better speedsters in the game, I would say. A lot of them are in these low tiers, but I think Prince Eric is okay. He's really held back by his normal activation, just being way too slow and clunky. You never want to be in that ship, and without it, he really doesn't have any defensive tools, as a lot of the rest of his kit is really offensive with his charge ship, and I think he'd be better suited in a different class rather than speedster, especially with how high his top speed is compared to a lot of the other speedsters in the game. Now, starting out the B tier, we have Woody. Now, Woody is a pretty interesting racer as he has a really high skill cap. If you can be good with Woody's lasso, he can honestly be quite a menace on the racetrack. But overall, his low top speed, the inconsistency of his lasso, and the lack of his defensive tools kinda keep him in the low B tier, but he can be a solid pick, especially in the right hands. Now, following Woody, we have Oswald. Now, Oswald made a splash in the game last season, and he is honestly a pretty decent racer. He's a solid trickster. I think what really holds Oswald back, though, is his lack of top speed, the fact that his unique ability uses his boost bar, and the fact that he doesn't have a lot of good crew members. All those factors kind of keep him in the low end of the B tier, but he isn't the worst racer in the game by any means. Now, following Oswald, we have Randall. And much like Woody, Randall is really held back by his high skill cap. Randall in the right hands and the right kind of lobby can be an absolute menace, filling up his screen bars and getting a massive boost in front of opponents, but most of the time he's just kind of average. His door doesn't do quite enough, especially when you compare him to Mike Wazowski or any other racer that can leap a large distance. Randall just seems kind of pathetic in comparison, and his top speed really isn't enough to carry him, even though it's not bad. He's right around the Jack Sparrow and Figment range, and that's just not enough to carry him above the B tier. Now, following Randall, we have his counterpart, Mike Wazowski. Mike Wazowski has certainly had a fall from grace, being the absolute best racer in the game a few seasons ago, to now sitting comfortably in the lower half of the B tier. Mike Wazowski just isn't amazing, and he got another nerf this season to the distance of his doors, and now that his doors don't take him nearly as far as they used to, they can be easily destroyed, and his top speed is the third worst in the game. Mike Wazowski I can't see him going above the B tier anytime soon unless he gets another buff for himself. Now, following Mike Wazowski, we have Wally, who was also introduced into the game last season, and Wally is actually a pretty decent speedster. His top speed, like most speedsters, just isn't high enough to let him compete competitively. On top of that, he doesn't have the greatest crew members, but his unique abilities are both useful in different situations. I really like collecting those boost trash piles or whatever they're called on the ground, and his fire extinguisher certainly has its use cases, and overall Wally is just a pretty decent racer, and he's super fun to play and you really can't go wrong with him, just a sort of average speedster. And following Wally, we have a racer in a very similar situation, and that is Belle. Belle is honestly extremely similar to Wally. She's a decent speedster with not a super high top speed stat. Both of her abilities are useful. Her birds did unfortunately get nerfed, but her furniture is okay, her birds are okay in different situations. She's just an average speedster, comfortably sits in the middle of the B tier without much of a fight in my opinion. Now, following Belle, we have someone who has gone up tremendously on this tier list, and that is Captain Gontu. Captain Gontu's power is finally being revealed with him having the 4th highest top speed stat in the game, and like I've said many times throughout this video, and I will say many times again, top speed is king right now, and so having the 4th highest top speed stat in the game, and an ability that can stun other people and grant you immunity, is going to be enough to carry you at least decently throughout this list. And while Gontu still isn't insane or anything, I think the middle of the B tier is a pretty comfortable spot for him, and we'll see if top speed becomes even more important in future seasons, especially once they fix the top speed bug, and maybe Gontu can climb up a few more tiers. Now, following Gontu, we have Gaston. No one can race like him. Gaston is a really fun character, and much like Randall, he has a super high skill cap and an ability that can be used super effectively in different situations, and he has a really high top speed stat, the 6th highest in the game, and much like Gontu, this with a pretty decent ability is going to carry him pretty high up the list. The reason he was placed above Gontu is because if you use his ability effectively, it can be way better than anything else in the game. If you can keep stunning people over and over and over again, it can be extremely effective. However, this is pretty hard to do, and so Gaston, I think, on average, finds himself in the B tier. Now, following Gaston, we have another pretty heavy racer in Baloo. Now, Baloo is just an overall very decent defender. He has a nice ability that is especially useful when you're in first place, a solid top speed stat, and shields galore. He can shield himself for almost the entire duration of the race, which is always an effective stat. I think Baloo would be a lot better if he was a cloak defender, but overall he's just a very solid racer, and if you can get into first place and get that pumpkin stream going, he can be very, very powerful indeed. Now, following Baloo, we have Steamboat Mickey, who actually unfortunately suffered a nerf to his trail ability, I believe. It was just made slightly worse, but I believe he got a top speed buff in compensation for that, which I think is actually pretty fair. And I think top of the B tier is pretty comfortable for Steamboat Mickey. He is just a very decent racer. He is held back by his lack of epic crew member shards. They're very hard to obtain, almost impossible, and getting Steamboat Mickey shards yourself isn't the easiest, so he's very hard to level up, but he is one of the better defenders in the game. And he certainly has his use case, again, kind of held back by his lack of crew members and top speed. Now, following Steamboat Mickey, we have Hercules. Now, Hercules has gone down since his little last jump on the tier list. He isn't quite A tier anymore, and that's just simply because he's being overshadowed by some other racers, but Hercules still is very decent. He got a buff to his unique ability in the latest updates, and it has shown that it's very effective. You know, Hercules has a decent top speed stat, overall just pretty solid stats, and his Pegasus is a solid ability that can be used in a lot of different situations, and Hercules, he's just pretty decent. I think he could go up again if his top speed was just slightly higher, or if he had a little bit more defensive tools to keep him safe during the race. Now, following Hercules and rounding out the B tier, we have, making his first appearance on this tier list, Olaf. Now, I think if I made a tier list last season, Olaf would have definitely been in the A tier, if not higher, because he had Cloak as his main ability, but it was unfortunately changed to Boost, I believe, which has made Olaf a lot worse from last season, and overall just being a speedster with not a super high top speed stat. There's only so high he can go, but Olaf still finds himself at the top of the B tier and is a solid option with a decent trail skill that can be very annoying to fight against, and then snowballs that can be useful in some situations but just aren't the best. Now, following Olaf and starting out the A tier, we have Elizabeth Swan. Now, Elizabeth Swan has been S tier since her release until now. She has fallen to the A tier, and that is because they nerfed her trail skill massively. She just isn't nearly as good now, and her lack of top speed, despite her incredible other stats, is kind of showing now that her trail skill isn't amazing. Don't get me wrong, she's still a very good racer and deserves her spot in the A tier, but her lack of trail skill and her low top speed just isn't enough to carry her all the way up to the S tier like she once was. Now, following Elizabeth Swan, we have Jessie, and from her last time on the tier list, she has fallen down a tier, and that's because she got a nerf to all her toys. They just aren't enough anymore. They don't pose as much of a threat or obstacle on the track. However, Jessie is still a very, very good character with one of the most insane stat pools in the game. However, all of the incredible stats come at the cost of having not the greatest top speed, and like I've said before, top speed is king right now, and if you don't have a high top speed stat, you just aren't going to find yourself in the S tier, unfortunately. Now, following Jessie, we have Stitch, my main man. I'm happy to see him in the A tier, but ever since he lost immunity to his skill, he has just not been able to quite make S tier. He's still a solid speedster with a decent stat pool. It is incredible, and a very obnoxious ability that is great at stunning people on the racetrack. And overall, Stitch is just a very solid pick, one of the better speedsters that you can choose in the game. Now, following Stitch, I think we have the most improved on this tier list. That's right, we have Beast. Now, this latest update, Beast got an insane buff to his acceleration and handling stats, which he oh so desperately needed, and now Beast, with his overall pretty incredible stat pool, high top speed stat, and the potential to go absolutely crazy if you can activate his Beast mode ability, he definitely deserves this spot in the A tier, and there are some Beast enthusiasts in my Discord who have really shown off his full potential, and I think he is very deserving deserving of this spot in A tier and is being slept on super hard right now. So definitely give Beast a try and level him up some if you haven't already this season. Now following Beast, we have sort of our last low top speed character on the list, and that is Angel. And the only reason Angel was able to get so high with her relatively low top speed is the fact that she has one of the best abilities in the game, and definitely the best crowd controlling ability in the game. It is insane the way Angel is able to catch up to you, stay immune, give you immunity, and then slow you down dramatically, making her able to surpass you and stay in front of you so long as her ability is active. And it is just an incredible ability that is super devastating when you come across her on the racetrack, and she is definitely deserving of her spot in the A tier. Now following Angel, we have, for the first time on this tier list, Elsa making her debut in the A tier. Now I'm a big Elsa fan, and it's no surprise to me that she is in the A tier. She has a pretty high top speed stat and then 2 abilities that are super useful. Freezing people in front of you is very effective, and placing a wall behind you again is equally as effective, with her being able to rack up the stuns. And on top of that, she's a defender. I could see her if she had Cloak instead of Shield, maybe being in the S tier, but I think with the way she shields herself, she is definitely deserving of her spot in the A tier. Now following Elsa, we have once again another new racer. We have Kristoff, and Kristoff is very similar to Elsa. They are both shield defenders, I believe, and Kristoff can throw logs behind him and stun people with Sven, and overall I think his abilities and his stat pool are just slightly more favorable than Elsa's, but honestly they're pretty interchangeable in my opinion, and both super solid shield defenders. Following Kristoff, we have Celia May. Now Celia May is an incredible racer. She's been like about A tier since her introduction into the game. She's a defender, which is, I believe, the best class in the game, so that's already a huge advantage. On top of that, she has a very strong crowd controlling ability. Think like Angel, but slightly worse. The reason she is above Angel though is because her top speed stat is honestly pretty decent and enough to keep her up in the A tier. Following Celia May, we have Shang. Now Shang is honestly the one I'm most surprised about on this tier list. I'm not a super huge Shang fan myself, but after taking a look at his stats and abilities and discussing it with some people and giving him a second look, Shang is honestly really powerful. He can stay immune almost the entire race with his unique ability, stun anyone that comes in contact with him, and on top of that he has a pretty high top speed stat and is a defender, the best class in the game, so it's no surprise after taking a second look that Shang finds himself near the top of the A tier. Now following Shang, we have Steamboat Pete, and it is no surprise that Steamboat Pete is this high up on the tier list. He has the second highest top speed in the game, he's gotten many buffs and recent updates, and is overall just a very powerful racer. I mean, a character being this heavy with this insane stat pool, second highest top speed in the game, Steamboat Pete, he's just insane. He can stun people, highest combat stat, I believe. He's just an incredible racer. Definitely upgrade and give Steamboat Pete a try if you haven't already. And finally, rounding out the A tier, we have making her musical debut on this tier list, Ariel. Now, Ariel has proven herself to be absolutely insane. Her top speed stat isn't amazing. Overall, her stat pool isn't the best thing in the game, but 1, she is a cloak defender, and 2, her abilities working together, charged and uncharged, can make her the fastest character in the game in the right situations. Yes, collecting her little thingamabob power-ups can be hard to do at times, but overall, they can just make you extremely effective, and when you use them in the right situation, she can be, like I said, the fastest character in the game, getting essentially 5 rush power-ups in one, which is just incredible. And she is definitely deserving of her spot at the top of the A tier, and maybe she'll climb up to S in future seasons once people start upgrading and using her a little bit more. Now, starting out the S tier, we have Anna making her debut on this tier list. Now, again, if I think I made one last season, Anna would be much higher up in the S tier, but unfortunately she did get a 20% nerf to the duration and effectiveness of both her skills, which has kind of dragged her down a little bit, but clearly not enough. Anna is still the queen of boost. She's able to boost almost the entire game. She's a trickster, she has decent stats, she can stay immune, give immunity to other people, and overall she's just a very strong, very quick, very boost heavy racer and definitely deserves her spot in the A tier. Moving on up, we have Bo Peep. Now, Bo Peep has been in the S tier for a while now, and it's pretty obvious to see why. She's a trickster with a high boost stat and a relatively decent top speed stat, so she can stay boosting almost the entire game and keep her top speed really high. Her ability gives her immunity and can drag people behind her while propelling her forward, which is just a really strong combination, and overall she definitely deserves to be in the S tier. Following Bo Peep, we have the Genie. Now, the Genie has the third highest top speed in the game, so it's pretty clear to see why he's this high up on the tier list. But on top of his massive top speed, he is a cloak defender, and his ability can let him cycle abilities or have 3 different use cases depending on where he is ranked in the race. And overall, Genie is just extremely versatile, high top speed, cloak defender, can cycle through so many abilities. He just has so many strengths and almost no weaknesses, and so it's no surprise that Genie is this incredibly high up on the tier list. Now, moving on up, we have Jumba. Jumba is, much like Genie, a cloak defender with an incredibly high top speed stat. However, what gives Jumba the edge over Genie is his unique ability. While Genie can cycle a million power-ups, Jumba has the ability to completely change how the game of Disney Speedstorm is played, because he can stun first place from wherever he is on the track. He can just shoot a missile up to first place, and he completely changes how the game is played. He's already super strong with his stat pool and being a cloak defender, but his blaster just makes an incredible difference on the racetrack, and I think definitely solidifies him this high up in the S tier, and he is super deserving of this number 6 spot. Now, starting out the top 5, we have Jasmine. Jasmine is by far the best speedster in the game. She was buffed tremendously this season. She has a super high top speed stat, the ability to gain manual boost or immunity whenever she wants from her tiger that can also stun people, and overall Jasmine is just insane. I talk a lot more about her in my top 5 best racers video for the season, so go check that out if you haven't seen it already, but Jasmine definitely deserves to be in the number 5 slot. Moving on up to number 4, we have Hans. Now, I think you guys will notice that Hans and Jasmine actually switched from my top 5 best racers video, and that is simply because Hans has a higher top speed stat and is slightly more versatile, because whereas Jasmine has to choose between either boost or immunity, Hans does not have this same choice and can just get immunity and stunning people, which will charge up his boost bar. And overall, having the highest top speed stat in the game, he definitely deserves this number 4 slot, and honestly, the only thing holding back Hans and Jasmine from being the best characters in the game is the fact that the top 3 are just so insane with some of the best abilities in the game, and they're just really hard to compete with. And starting off in the number 3 slot, taking the bronze medal, we have Sully. Now, Sully has been one of the best racers in the game for a couple seasons now. He has an insane top speed stat, insane combat, just an overall incredible stat pool. He can boost for almost the entire race thanks to him being a brawler with a super offensive kit, and the fact that his roar ability fills up his manual boost bar completely whether he hits someone with it or not, and then if he hits someone with it, it stuns them, knocks them back, and fills up his boost bar even more. Sully is just a menace, and I think the true king of top speed, although Hans is coming for his title, and I'm very curious to see in next season if Hans can overtake Sully. But following Sully, taking the silver medal in the number 2 slot, we have Buzz Lightyear. Now, much like Sully, Buzz Lightyear has been dominant for seasons now. His charged rocket, do I need to say anything more? His charged rocket is just Hands down, one of the best, if not the best ability in the game. It can propel you halfway across the racetrack, and you can jump to go another half, and it is just insane. Obviously, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it really doesn't feel like it when you're driving. How fast and how far his rocket can propel you is absolutely insane. On top of that, he is a defender with a relatively high top speed stat, overall just making him an absolute menace on the racetrack. But finally, taking the number 1 slot, do I need to say less? We have Aladdin. Now, Aladdin is an absolute crazy trickster. He has a pretty decent top speed stat, an absolutely insane boost stat, and then his main attraction, the carpet. Yes, it was nerfed a little bit this season, but it is just not enough to stop him. And now that he can farm power-ups by side bashing people, he is better than ever. And his charged carpet, uncharged carpet, they're all amazing. Aladdin definitely deserves this number 1 slot on the tier list, and I think is easily the best racer in Disney Speedstorm, even though he is a little bit of a glass cannon. But there you guys have it. That is my Season 6 tier list. Let me know, what do you guys think about it? I know Eve and Ursula aren't on here. That is because they either haven't been out for super long or they just aren't available yet in the case of Ursula. But if you want to see an updated tier list at the end of this season, be sure to let me know. I would definitely be interested in making one. And if you have questions about the tier list, be sure to let me know in the comments below or join my Discord server. We have a whole channel dedicated towards talking about the tier list each season, and I would love to have you guys help collaborate out with some of the best Disney Speedstorm players in the game in order to make these tier lists possible. But thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more tier lists on this channel, and I will catch you all in the next video. Peace out.